Scott Piotr, former Newport Beach City Councilman. I'm here with Costa Mesa Brief, and we're here interviewing John Moorlach, who is a candidate and the current State Senator for the 37th Senate District in the state of California. John, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be here.
Hey, you know, you're famous, of course. You started your career running for the county treasurer's position, and at the time we had our now infamous treasurer, Bob Citron. So those people that may or may not know John is famous for basically going around telling people the sky is going to fall in regards to the county fund, and it ended up falling. So tell us how you kind of fell into that position as county treasurer in a short little bio here.
Well, what's nice about that story, Scott, is you were there as well at the time. I was, as they would say in the political arena, I was recruited, and I did not like the idea of running for county treasurer because as a certified public accountant and a certified financial planner at the time, I served on boards, and every time I served on a board, I was the treasurer, and it kind of grated on me to be asked, hey, why don't you run for treasurer against Robert L. Bob Citron? In fact, I was really annoyed about it, and I went on a backpacking trip out of Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite to Young Lakes, and on the drive home, one of my friends, he says to me, why don't you quit being mad about it? Do some research, and then let's say you run and you win, then you're home every night with your family, and you don't have to fly to Sacramento like some people want to serve in the legislature, and you have the king's ear. You can talk to the supervisors and give them advice. So I said, okay, Rick, I will do some research. And Rick Pickering was the friend who did that. He now is the CEO for the California State Fair, the exposition. So we're both now in Sacramento, so we see each other there. So I started doing homework, looked at the portfolio, was astounded at what was happening. Mr. Citron was running what we would call a hedge fund, known as the carry trade, where you borrow at low interest rates at the short end of the yield curve and then buy bonds at 4 years that are paying more, and you get the spread. All great until the short end goes up. And so I lost the election, but 6 months later, everything I said that could happen happened, and that gave me national notoriety. And then that gives me a little bit of gravitas to operate in Sacramento. They all know what I've accomplished, and they know that I'm at least somewhat of substance.
Right, you didn't just fall into it. Literally, you worked yourself into that job, almost where the Board of Supervisors in 1995 had no choice but to appoint you because the public was putting so much pressure on him that, hey, Moorlach's the only guy that called this. You need to get him on, and he needs to fix it. And you did. And then you went on and you went to the Board of Supervisors for 8 years. I think that was in 2006. And then you subsequently, after you were termed out with the Board of Supervisors, you went to Sacramento and you became, in a special election, you became the state senator for the 37th. Now, it's a little bit of a difference, right? In Orange County, you had Republican board, basically, and you could get things done. You didn't always see eye to eye with everybody, but you basically got things done. Sacramento's a little different, though. Tell us a little bit about how you've enjoyed your now almost 5 years there, and why should we send you back?
Well, that's great. Multiple series of questions.
Yes,
but
in a mouthful, yes.
The interesting things about being a legislator is that I am no longer an executive. So I was an executive as the department head for the treasurer, tax collector office for 12 years. And then you're sort of close to an executive as a supervisor. You only need to get 3 votes to get something done.
Right.
So it's different as someone who was a business owner, partner in a CPA firm, to now be in a legislative arena. If I want to be an executive, I have to do a bill to tell a department what to do. It's a whole different dynamic.
Right.
The dynamic with regards to the board majority having Republicans in Orange County versus being one of 4 Republican senators, there's just 10 of us that are up there right now. That does make things real frustrating. But for me, the big issues are still the same. I'm still concerned about unfunded pension plans. I'm still concerned about unfunded other post-employment benefits, i.e. retiree medical. I'm still frustrated with some of the other issues that come up that are related to executive type issues. And so I've been using my skill sets along with my relational abilities to work with those on the other side of the aisle and try my best in committee and on the floor to be persuasive when I can, knowing full well that it's going to be real hard to get them to agree.
Right, so you're, like you said, you're one of 10 Republicans in a 40-member body. So you're really in a super minority situation. And so your way of attacking or trying to approach the issues and problems, which you're fully aware of because you've got that experience, is to try and convince them. And basically you're saying you carry some gravitas up there because you've been there and you've done that. And a lot of the other people on the other side of the aisle haven't. What do you think is probably the most important issue right now in Sacramento that this state is having to have to deal with that you're part of?
Well, that's also a multi-component response. Because I'm an accountant and I prepared tax returns for a long time, the personal income tax for California comprises 2/3 of our revenues for our general fund, and half of those revenues are generated by about 1% of the population. So I am really concerned
Those
about
evil 1%ers are paying all that
I
money?
would say they're evil. I think we should be sending them a box of fruit every year and saying thank
Thank
you
you,
very
yes.
much, for being here, for staying here, because a lot of them are buying homes in Incline Village. Nevada has no state income tax.
Right.
So if you are making more than $1 million a year in taxable income, then you're going to save 13.3% by moving a few miles over the border, right? You're going to save $133,000. Now, you may pay for it differently. You might have a higher property tax because Nevada doesn't have a Prop 13. But we are seeing the population of California start to flatten. We've got internal growth, but we're seeing a migration out. We're seeing them go to neighboring states, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, especially Texas. And so that's going to have an impact if the 1%ers start to move because they're the most mobile. I had one Newport Beach resident who came to me and said, look, I do make more than $1 million a year and I do pay 13.3%, but now that I can't deduct more than $10,000 of state and local taxes,
on his federal return.
On his federal return, he says my effective marginal tax rate is really 23%. So why should I
For living in California.
For living here in the 37th district.
Right.
So he says to me, convince me why I need to pay $1 out of every $4 I earn to the state of California. Convince me why that's a good thing. And I said, I don't know how to do that. So he moved to Florida.
You always say, the weather's good.
The weather's great, but he bought a $10 million mansion in Miami and he's moved out of state. He can still perform the job he was doing here from there, right? So why not have a different location? He just gets to see the sun come up, in the east, it doesn't get the west, setting in the west. So I'm really concerned about that. And then point two, I'm really concerned about the next recession. If these guys don't sell stocks and have capital gains, we could really have some serious issues, and that would have a major drop. So I'm one of those guys who's saying, let's keep beefing up the reserves, let's keep paying down these pension liabilities, let's be aggressive in those areas as opposed to one-time projects and ongoing budget constraints that you're putting in that will be there every year. And let's not be voting for bonds all the time. So I'm just looking at it a little differently than, say, others who are on the other side who just think that everything's just going to keep going. But their answer is higher taxes. But we've got the highest income tax, the highest sales tax, the highest gas tax in the nation, and we're getting close in property tax too.
People sit there and tell us, well, your property taxes are so low, but the property values are so high, the actual dollars you're paying out is equal to Texas and some of the other states that have high property taxes. And they want to get rid of Prop 13. What's going on there?
We call it split roll. So the long story is that the unions looked at the Hyatt Hotel in Sacramento, which is directly across the street from the Capitol. I know you've stayed there. Next door, they built the Sheraton. Well, the Hyatt has a much lower tax base than the Sheraton, and so they're going, well, how come the Sheraton pays this amount of property tax and the Hyatt pays this, and it only goes up 2% a year? Maybe we ought to raise the property tax for all commercial properties. And that's what they're asking the voters to do, raise the amount of tax on commercial property, the Disneylands, but also the small mom and pop shops. Most of the people that own real estate in in California are actually small business owners, and you're going to start having an impact on how many more people they can or cannot hire, and how many they may have to lay off. So you got to look at the big picture.
So when they say split roll, what they mean is they're going to hike the business property taxes,
Right.
not the individual or homeowner
Residential, not
policies.
the homeowners. The homeowners
Because they vote, right?
No, because they turn over.
They turn over enough.
Homes are turning over fast enough, but commercial property is not. So you're seeing residences, they turn over about once every 7 years. You don't have too many what we call Prop 13 babies. They had bought their homes before 1978.
78.
We're not seeing that's declining. So, but on the business side, everything seems to be static. Disneyland's never going to sell and
Right.
step up their appraised value. So the reason for doing it is they know that my concerns about the debt and what could happen with the personal income tax, which fluctuates with economic cycles. At least property tax kind of has a steady flow to it. So you can, one, pay down these pension liabilities, and two, you can have a little more dependable income stream. And so the ballot argument will say, this is going to be for education and better public safety, and it's not going to be it's not going to say you're screwing and putting the squeeze on business owners.
And people don't realize business owners don't pay the taxes, right? They pass those on to their consumer, their customers, and if the market doesn't allow them to pass that on, what are they going to do? They're going to move.
That's right.
They're going to leave to where they don't have to pay as much because they're competing against somebody that might be in Ohio or wherever.
Right. And they're already paying maybe the highest energy prices for electricity, which
Right.
doesn't seem to, look like it's going down thanks to wildfires and public safety power shutoffs and all the other stuff that's hammering this state. So a lot of people are saying, well, maybe I can manufacture my product somewhere else. I'll give you one story, Scott. I had a CEO, we did lunch, and he had a product that they had invented. That the headquarters was in La Jolla. Mm-hmm. And his engineers said, we want a manufacturing facility within 4 hours. And that could be like, get on the plane in San Diego airport and fly
to Phoenix.
Anywhere.
Okay.
And Phoenix it was. Phoenix said, we can help you. California, they never heard from California. They finally called, of all people, Gray Davis and asked for some help. And Davis said, yeah, give me a $20,000 retainer and I'll help you on all the entitlements and all the permitting, and it'll take about 4 years. Well, they built the place in Phoenix within 4 months, right? so it's like, we are not helping our residents because we're making it much too difficult, even for housing, trying to build houses here. It's a whole other story. Right?
I was going to say, that brings us to a good next story, and that is we've got a homeless crisis.
Right.
Part of it, at least people are blaming the homeless crisis as the cost of housing. But like you say, when you go to develop a housing tract or whatever, it takes you 2, 4, 6, 10 years. There's development in Banning Ranch, for instance, in Newport Beach. They've been going at it for over 20 years, and they're no closer. The Coastal Commission nixed them, and they're basically back to ground zero. What do we do? How do we fix let's start first affordable housing, and then let's talk homeless.
Well, first, don't build something within the coastal zone. That would be the answer to the Banning Ranch issue. The second
I thought you'd say get rid of the Coastal Commission, because they're really not protecting the coast. They're making it more expensive. That's it.
I have applied for the Coastal Commission a couple times. I was not appointed.
I just actually applied too.
But we need to figure out, one, how to enable developers to entitle and move property to build product so that they make a profit, but it's also reasonable. The market can take care of this problem if we let the free market do what it's supposed to do. And right now we're making it very restrictive. But for homeless,
does that mean CEQA, or CEQA is called the California Environmental Quality Act? Are they actually seriously considering reducing the requirements of CEQA?
They talk about it seriously, but they never do a thing. So the California Environmental Quality Act has been used as a tool to actually prevent development.
Right.
You talk about the long time. The reason Banning Ranch hasn't been developed is not only the Coastal Commission, but there are people that are ready to sue at the drop of a hat.
Right.
So they use CEQA, and they say, look, your environmental impact report isn't thorough enough. It doesn't handle certain traffic concerns or whatever.
2,000 pages isn't enough. We need 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I looked at the EIR. We call it an EIR. I thought it was pretty impressive, but not that banning will take care of itself, but we're using that as an example because they're coming up. The opponents are coming up with a free market solution. That is, we'll buy the land. We'll just pay the owner fair market value, and then he doesn't have to develop it, and that ends.
They can keep it open if they want to raise the money to do that. That works for everybody.
Beautiful. I mean, that's
doesn't
how it
help
works.
for our housing crisis.
Doesn't help the housing crisis.
But it helps that situation.
But to say that that's the cause of homelessness in Newport Beach, that might be a stretch. I would say that
you were part of the homeless task force when you were with the Board of Supervisors. And it's a very complicated problem. Give us a nutshell.
Well, yeah, as the former chair of the Commission to End Homelessness,
it's not ended yet, by the way.
Pardon me?
It's not ended
No,
yet.
we knew that was just a phrase. We've been told 2,000 years ago, the poor you will have with you always.
Yes.
So the space that I've been working in to try to reduce homelessness has been addressing the severely mentally ill. Because a major percentage of people that are on the streets are severely mentally ill. They have depression, or they're bipolar, or mostly schizophrenic. And so how do we help these people?
So you're not even talking about those with dependencies like on alcohol or drugs. This is a category in itself.
Right, and they overlap. It's a good point. They overlap because severely mentally ill people will self-medicate. So
therefore, drug and alcohol dependency.
Exactly. And so we're not getting to the root causes. So what happened in 1967? They put together in Sacramento, in the legislature, the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act.
That's a mouthful.
It is, LPS for short. And it was a reaction to a study that said that severely mentally ill people in institutions were in inhumane conditions. So they said, oh, that's terrible. Then we better shut the institutions down, and then we ought to move them into the communities and have services there to help them out. They didn't do that. They just let them out of the institutions, closed them, and where did they go? They went on the streets, and then they went into the jails. So the largest mental institution in Orange County is the Central Jail in Santa Ana. But the state has never stepped up to say, how do we help these people with an assisted outpatient treatment program? And we have got to take another look at LPS and say, wait a second, we need to reinstitute providing institutions where we can get these people in an involuntary hold for a period of time so that we can find the right medication at the right dosage to help them mainstream and get back into society.
So rather than fix the institutions, they just abolish them, promising a fix that would have been more neighborhood-based but never coming through with it.
Correct.
And we're left with, in effect, we
A
see
mess.
that on the streets.
A mess.
That's
It's
ridiculous,
a mess.
and it's only getting worse.
We wouldn't let people with Alzheimer's out on the street.
True.
We wouldn't let someone with dementia or someone who just had a stroke. So, but we let these people that are severely mentally ill just go out and fend for themselves. In LA, we're losing 3 homeless people a day. They die on the streets.
Just because of health reasons.
Right. When you're out there, the diseases we're starting to see on the streets are getting pretty scary. Typhoid, tuberculosis. I mean, it's inhumane. It's medieval times.
It's ridiculous. I see President Trump is putting pressure on the California legislature on a myriad of issues. I kind of chuckle because now all of a sudden the Democrats, since Trump got elected, actually have discovered the 10th Amendment, which is anything not enumerated into the federal government is supposed to be the state's domain, and they're trying to take domain back. The latest is Trump sits there and says basically, you cannot force insurance providers to require to pay for abortion services, and if you continue to do that, then we're going to take your federal funding on the health care. Where are you at on that? Where do you think Sacramento's at on that?
Well, you know the answer to that. Sacramento being dominated by progressives, liberals certainly approve of abortions, and President Trump is certainly on the other side of that. So, again, it's just more of a cultural clash here of different philosophies. A lot of us are concerned about the unborn, and others think it's a woman's right. So right now the latter's winning.
Well, the
I do want
example,
to,
though,
but I do
remember-
want to give you a little more of a response on the homeless side.
Okay.
Just to let you know, in that severely mentally ill space, I did SB 585 with Darrell Steinberg to provide funding for Laura's Law. It's another subject, but it's an area where Orange County has led the rest of the state. I did SB 1273 to provide more psychiatric beds. We only had 10 in all of Orange County, so now police officers can bring somebody somewhere, when they're going through a psychotic episode or
besides county jail.
well, yeah, that's not an emergency room, right? And so we did SB 640 last year to try to increase or expand, the definition of gravely disabled to try and help more people. So I've been working hard in that space, and I just wanted to throw that in, that I'm not just complaining, we are providing answers.
And it's a tough answer. I know as a councilman, if I got calls from constituents, disproportionately, they were about the homeless. Why is this guy here? Why is this guy in the street? I was afraid to walk by him in the street. If the guy is mumbling or doing something and they just didn't feel safe just to even walk by him. Now others, like you say, there are other issues and they're not incompatible. Although it's, when they set up a camp, it's kind of embarrassing that right in the middle, right at the entrance to, in this case, Fashion Island, you end up with a homeless camp. What's the solution? I mean, obviously there's a lot of different angles in here. What's the immediate need and immediate thing that needs to happen?
Well, let me just attack it two ways. One, I want you to know that a lot of those homeless people are actually Newport Beach residents. When you have, in the case of your city, wonderful, bright, intelligent, wealthy people, and they have children, there's a likelihood that one of those kids could have schizophrenia or be bipolar or have depression. And so they self-medicate. And so if you look at Hogue, their addiction and mental health efforts, packed. You and I have friends that have lost kids to depression. They've committed suicide. It's something we've really got to focus on. So there's good things happening at Hogue. They have Aspire, which is an incredible program for young kids in high school, and trying to intervene earlier. I did a bill with Scott Wiener, a senator out of San Francisco, SB 1004, to do more funding for prevention and early intervention. Chalk Hospital has built a whole ward now for pediatric mental health. So we're working on the front end. I also joint authored a bill with Kevin DeLeon, Senator Pro Tem, who ran for U.S. Senate on the left of Dianne Feinstein. So a conservative Republican from Orange County can work with a liberal Democrat from L.A. County. And we joint authored a bill that was called No Place Like Home that put a measure on the ballot in November of 18, Proposition 2, called No Place Like Home, where we said, let's use the Mental Health Services Act revenue stream and borrow against that stream and use a portion of that income stream to pay the principal and interest. And it was the ballot measure that did the best in November of 2018. And so that will give counties the opportunity to build immediate supportive housing. You can't medicate and treat someone if you don't have them in a location for a while. So that's in place. The governor, Newsom, certainly knows that homelessness is the number one issue in the state. Everybody's concerned. How many housewives have called me and said, I don't like going to my shopping center to buy food anymore.
Exactly.
It's intimidating. And so if we can get them housed, we get them in a program. Darrell Steinberg and I have both visited Haven for Hope in San Antonio, Texas, which is a model for a homeless shelter, which provides just not only food and sleeping arrangements, but it provides a chapel and a detox center and a medical clinic and a kennel, because these homeless people need.
So you got all of these cities now are being required to go out there and provide housing. They're not allowed to enforce their no camping ordinances. Is this center that you're talking about, is that going to be a regional center that all the cities can kind of donate to and therefore be able to enforce their no camping ordinances? Or do the cities have to do like Judge Carter is saying, basically you have to provide a shelter in your city and provide for those people that maybe have roots in your city? I mean, what do the cities have to do to get the guys off the street today?
Yeah, well, as you know, as a former council member, you were supposed to have an SB2 zone somewhere in your general plan, a location in your city that should have had a year-round homeless shelter adequate to house 200 people. Every city was supposed to do that. Every city can't do that. No. So your idea of collaborating with neighboring cities, doing something jointly, great idea. But I don't see that leadership. I haven't seen that yet. Having been in downtown Santa Ana for 20 years,
right,
watching the homeless
the
there.
Heart of the homeless.
And I would say while I was supervisor, the numbers went down. So since 2014, it's kind of been mushrooming. But we were working on it while I was there the entire time.
They all moved to the Santa Ana River site and left downtown.
And I'm talking about the whole county, you know. But yeah, they move and they form camps and they elect a mayor and they all operate. It's just
it's
really
like
fascinating.
It's their own little city.
It's their own little city. They have their own enforcement.
I didn't realize they did that. They have their own police too. They're enforcers that go around and take care of stuff.
That, or they collaborate and they find out where can we find bicycles and where can we house them and repair them and sell them. I mean, it's just, you know, fascinating little subculture. But if we have to find locations within cities, very difficult. You know the NIMBY issue. You were a victim of the NIMBY issue in Newport Beach. This is not simple, but somewhere, somehow, we have to find a facility to get these people mainstream. This is not a simple issue. I mean, the whole
and it's
spectrum,
a long-term issue.
You got someone that just couldn't pay the rent, you know, and to someone who's severely mentally ill.
Right now, everybody's saying, what do we have to do now? It's like all of a sudden everybody left the encampment you're talking about, went into all the different cities, and now all of a sudden, instead of being somewhere else where they didn't have to look at them, they're on the street in front of their house.
Right.
And all they know is, you know, we pay taxes. Why are these people here?
Exactly.
All right, another hot issue. I'm going, you know, whether you like it or not, it's an issue. SB 54, sanctuary state.
Right.
You know, it's another one of those thumb in the eye of Donald Trump in a lot of ways. They're basically saying, hey, we don't care about your immigration status. We're going to treat you like citizens. Including, I understand there's a school district up in Northern California that's allowing non-citizens to vote. Tell me where you fall on the issue. What's our solution?
Well, I voted against SB 54.
Smart move.
I am an immigrant. Mm-hmm. So I came here legally. I came through the front door. So I get a little offended by bills that defend or assist those that did not. Just speaking from personal experience.
Right.
So on the flip side, the federal government is supposed to monitor our borders, and it's failed to do so for not only a few years, but a few decades.
Right.
20 years ago, half the students in LA County were undocumented. I mean, this has been a long
But the state's trying to fight Trump from being able to do something about it, too.
It did not start with Trump. Trump is saying, let's start working on this border. The federal government has neglected to do that, right?
Correct.
And so now he's stepping up and saying something, and the number of Democrat electeds in Sacramento are saying, wait a second, now we have a constituency that would not benefit from that, and we now have to take a position to help them out. They are reacting from in their minds from a humane position. So you can see why an SB 54 had the necessary votes to pass. We've got a unique situation in California.
Well, what about the people like you that immigrated legally and went through all the channels, whether they be from Vietnam or Mexico or Holland,
China?
I mean, those people, don't they resent? I mean, regardless as to the ethnic background, don't they object to people, in effect, cutting in line? And then the state's turning around saying it's okay?
I believe so.
What do we do?
Yeah, what do we do?
Elect more
what do we do?
people that are not going to cater to that constituency.
Do we provide a better road to citizenship? Do we say, okay, show us your income tax returns for the last 10 years and show that you've been a productive contributor to the state and federal government? Would you find something that sort of is in between, open borders and, strict borders? You don't have this problem in most European countries, right? So
because they have strong borders.
Right. So where's the model and where's maybe the compassionate route? And do I have all the answers? No, I don't. But we find ourselves in a situation that was not created by the state, but was created by the federal government. And now how do we address it?
So in San Francisco, You have to have a map to know where the needles are and where human excrement is. Is this what happens when you have a one-party rule? And is it going to spread over the rest of the state?
Well, it doesn't help that Democrats have run Sacramento for more than 50 years. Look, we've got the highest poverty rate of any state in the nation. We have the highest homeless rates of any state in the nation. It's not a really pleasant testimony to what happens when one party runs a state for this length of time. We certainly need a little more balance. We could use a little more Republicans. I think the voters of California have to realize that maybe what they've been doing and voting for needs to change. Maybe we need to come to a tipping point where they say, okay, let's swing it back a little bit and have some balance when we debate these bills. I could certainly use another 10 Republican senators to have a sporting chance to debate on some of these critical issues and to provide a little different perspective on what's an appropriate methodology to address some of these issues.
You know, people don't realize the state Senate in California, your district, is larger than every congressional district in the country. It's larger than, obviously, the assembly, because it's got basically two assembly districts in your district. It's bigger than, what, 10, 12 states as far as the amount of constituents you've got in your district?
Yeah, when you use the term larger, I have a larger population.
Population,
about a million constituents. You know, we have 4 million people, 40 million in the state. You divide that by 40, you have a million each.
Where a congressional district might have 600 to 800.
Supervisor has 600,000, yeah.
So it's people don't realize the effort that you have to make every 4 years to get reelected. If you were talking to the voter today, tell them one thing that you would want to convince them to vote for you.
Well, I would think that the overriding reason is that they would have someone who is experienced, someone who has a good grasp of finances and is adding value.
Unlike most politicians, right?
I can only speak for
well,
myself.
you're the only CPA out there, right?
I have licenses, right? They're not easy to achieve. And I was a partner in a CPA firm for 10 years. That's a pretty big job for a pretty large local firm. And I've served as the treasurer of the 6th most populated county in the nation, bigger than 22 states. So and then I served as a supervisor for that county, which makes me equivalent to governor for some smaller states, right?
Right.
With the amount of
the
size of populations. So you get someone who's experienced, someone who understands the drill, someone that you've watched for 25 years, and I think I've been pretty straightforward about almost every issue. If you don't agree with me,
flip-flops.
If you don't agree with me, you at least understand what my position is,
right,
and why I'm voting the way I do. And I communicate. I mean, if you go to my blog, I'm communicating multiple times a week on how I'm addressing all the issues based on how they come up in the media. So I've been very transparent. I mean, if you want to know about me, just go to my blog and you'll have a fun time. And then so that's the reason you're voting, because you're selecting a candidate for a job. Mm-hmm. So do you need someone who's a professional who really doesn't need the job? Because I've already done plenty in my life, but I am here willing to give you another 4 years. And if that's something that's important to you, then great. But if you are someone who's not concerned about fiscal conservativeness and trying to protect this state, trying to make it affordable for our kids and our grandkids, then we've got candidates that are more than happy to be backed by public employee unions that will run the show, and then when the ship hits the sand, you can remember I warned you.
Or the sky did fall.
Exactly.
Hey, John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care.